Back to Behind the Headlines. Jerry and I are joined in this particular segment by Steve Hicks, who is the president of APSCUF, the state faculty union that works at the 14 state universities, Millersville, Edinburgh, Shippensburg, Kutztown, and so forth. And Steve, you're the bearer of good news. Welcome back. I believe we've talked for some time on this show about the difficulty that the state system and APSCUF was having in reaching a fair contract for the professors. And a contract has been reached now. There is no, well, I should just stop there and ask you to please tell us about the contract and how you came about finally getting one.
Well, I don't know that I can go very deeply into that, but it is a good place to start to point out that we were at the negotiations table 26 months, that our contract expired July 1st of 2011.
26 months. Is this the longest negotiating period ever experienced by APSCUF?
Yes, that is the longest we've been at the table in our history, which goes back in terms of collective bargaining 40 years. So it was a challenge, but I think we ended up with a fair contract to both sides. It's a sort of contract you expect out of collective bargaining. I mean, people talk about one side or the other always winning, but usually in collective bargaining you end up in the middle, and it's a very middle of the road kind of agreement. It's very fair. It largely mirrors what AFSCME and the other large state unions received in June 2011 in terms of compensation. Which means there was no pay increase at all in 11-12, as you know, Charlie, you're very aware of. It does have small across-the-board increases in the three ending years, 1%, 1%, and 2%. And on the other side, we increased the co-pays on several elements of the health care plan to help the state system offset some costs and try and change their health care is a big issue, and the cost of health care, and we tried to defray that a certain amount. And we also eliminated a few distance ed payments, but we kept some too. So that was a trade-off we made. The biggest thing from the faculty's point of view in terms of changes is we put in an element that we get to discuss class size through the curriculum committee in the contract for the first time. And that's important to us, as you know, Charlie, in the classroom. It doesn't give us the power to determine class size, but it does mean we get to provide input on paper, and that if the administration decides to go with a different number, they have to tell us why on paper. And we feel that that's a positive, and it'll create a dialogue, and you know, some of these decisions will be made more out in the open than they have been in the past. And we all recognize that class size has been increasing constantly for the last 20 years. And
my class sizes have gone from 25 to 45.
Right.
Just in the last 3 to 4 years.
Right. The push, all the things we'll probably talk about here in a few minutes about budget and the crunches and doing more for less, you know, all of that is affected. And we'd really like to have some say as to, you know, in terms of the curriculum, what is an optimal class size? How many people should be in that class so the learning experience is the best it possibly can be? And so this provides it, and we're very pleased with that.
And for our viewers, it would be good to let everyone in Pennsylvania know the size and scope of this economic engine, you know, why we're happy to have this contract settled, happy to have our distinguished faculty, you know, not having to worry about this. But could you go on and tell our viewers a little bit about the, you know, the huge size and depth and breadth across the Commonwealth?
Well, the state system's budget is about $1.5 billion, just their E&G, not even their auxiliaries. It has an impact somewhere in the neighborhood of $10 billion a year in the Commonwealth. It's the 13th largest employer in the Commonwealth. So it has a huge economic impact. And one of the positives, of course, of having a contract agreement reached without a strike is you don't disrupt all that economic opportunity. But the other thing is my members, and Charlie's one of them, it's very much their vocation being in the classroom. I mean, they don't want to be out on strike. They want to be in the classroom educating students. teaching them about political science or English or mathematics. And they want to be doing that because they want to change students' lives. And we do a lot of that. Currently, the largest major across the state system is business. And in Pennsylvania these days, that's not terribly a surprise, but it may surprise people because we were normal schools, and people think of us as education as our primary major. But anymore, they're only third behind business and the health sciences. We have almost every institution has a quality nursing program. We certify more nurses than anybody else in the Commonwealth. And in this day where healthcare, either we just talked about in terms of the contract, but the governor's talking about Medicaid. All those healthcare issues are so important to us. It's such a huge part of the economy. We're trying to help with those kinds of professionals.
And follow up with the numbers. How many students are you touching, and families, and how about the faculty? It's thousands of faculty.
We have somewhere in the neighborhood of 6,000 faculty at 14 state-owned institutions. There are 115,000 students. We have 500,000 plus graduates. The best thing about the system in terms of the governor and the legislature and the Commonwealth is almost 80% of our students stay in Pennsylvania and get jobs in Pennsylvania after they graduate. So we are the home institutions of higher learning, and we provide the educated professionals in your communities, whether it's teachers or nurses or people going into business and running businesses. And we have multiple universities that have entrepreneurial small business centers and help set up small businesses. So,
well, Steve, right after the tentative agreement was announced between APSCUF and the state system, we find that the governor announced his budget proposal for this forthcoming year. And how does his higher education proposal look in comparison to the last 2 years? And from your perspective, from APSCUF's perspective, what are the pros and cons of this particular proposal?
Yeah, it's a very different year this year. If you remember right, 2 years ago in his first budget, the governor proposed a 54% cut to the state system budget. And we did a lot of work to turn that around, and it ended up being 18% cut. I mean, there were rallies on the Capitol steps, rallies on every campus. We did a lot of lobbying, and the legislature really listened and really were supportive of higher education. This year, the Friday before the address, there was a press conference with the higher ed people saying, well, he's proposing flat funding, but he wants higher ed people to keep tuition as low as possible. So that's the deal. So this year our funding is about the same as last year, $412 million. People have joked on the Hill that it's an amazing world where you have press conferences announcing flat funding. I mean, that's the strange world we live in these days. And of course, flat funding is better than an 18% cut, but we're still living with that 18% cut from 2 years ago. And even flat funding isn't a carry budget. The state system's numbers indicate that they needed 2.8% increase to just carry the budget from last year. So if they're not going to raise tuition by any significant amount and keep it as low as possible, they're going to have to find more ways to tweak their budget and make up several $1 million, probably tens of millions of dollars, given the size of the engine. So that'll be interesting to see how that works. I think the other thing about his budget that is concerning to us, I think we're pretty happy about flat funding given the conditions and what we've seen the last few years, but part of his budget has linkages in it, and false choices, if you would, that we have to change the pension plan to generate $170 million approximately to make the budget that he proposed balance. And we're a little concerned if the legislation doesn't pass with that $170 million. We all know higher ed is the discretionary pot that so often is reached into when there are shortfalls. So that's a bit concerning. on top of the fact that just the pension itself issue is concerning. But we
Another big
really
issue
hate
you
to
have-
see some trade-offs. that
Right.
we're
And
being
another
concerned.
big issue you have too is with federal funding and the uncertainty of that. Can you go in for our viewers, you know, what you
Huge.
have to live with without trying to make your budgets?
Right. I mean, this, we're taping the week.
In the last 2 minutes.
We're down to 2 minutes. Great. The sequester happened last week, and the state system gets somewhere in the neighborhood of $180 million from the federal government. So if that 5% carries over, that's a pretty big impact. Fortunately, a big part of that $180 million is Pell Grants, which aren't supposed to be touched the first year. But the biggest student impact is on work study. There's a big cut in work study, the 5% plus, and we have 5% of our students on work study. So that's a concern that they're going to have to go out and get another job or borrow more money, which is a major issue with our people.
We don't want to let you go. In the last minute or the last 45 seconds, can you tell us a little bit about the tenure of the Chancellor? John Kavanaugh, of course, has been our Chancellor, only the third Chancellor we've ever had.
Right.
He's left at the end of February. We're going to have a new one. How would you assess the tenure of our third Chancellor?
Well, I think since I don't have a terribly long time, Dr. Kavanaugh was confronted with a lot of tough problems. I mean, we talked about the budget issue. Nobody foresaw those kinds of things when he started 5 years ago. So he had a lot of challenges. I think in terms of policy, faculty had a lot of concerns with the direction he wanted to go in terms of distance ed and experiential learning. We want to be more judicious than he seemed to want to be. But he was leading in those kinds of directions. And it'll be interesting to see over time as we look back what his legacy is going to be.
Okay, thank you very much, Steve. I appreciate having Dr. Hicks with us.
Thank you.
And follow us on Facebook. Be sure to take a look at our archives on YouTube, and of course, the Voice of PA. We'll be with you again next week. We look forward to seeing you then. Stay tuned.